Hi, everyone. This is Dawn Richard, also known as The Awakening with Dawn, and this is the Wake Up to Real Love podcast, where we share stories of struggles and triumphs in love, sex, and relationships, along with expert advice to create more conscious connections. I am really honored today to have my new friend, Robert Schwenkler. He is the founder of the Brotherhood Community, an amazing organization dedicated to the development of integrated male leaders, men who fully embody their sensitivity and potency. It's a powerful combination, Robert, in service of a more beautiful, equitable, and sustainable world for all. Robert also works privately with select clients who are ready to create non-linear yet exponential results in their careers, relationships, and lives. Here, he blends deep coaching and somatic healing to help clients create their best lives. Past clients of Robert's have tripled their revenue, rekindled the passion in their relationships, and found deeper inner peace by working with the coach, shaman, magician, Robert. Welcome, Robert Schwenkler.
Hi, thank you, Dawn.
Okay, so this is the question I have from out of left field.
Okay.
I saw this really interesting post on your Facebook page. I want to know what inspired you to post about the Rwandan drummers and dancers.
Oh man, well, there's multiple facets to that answer. A really simple one is that before I did this, my men's leadership work, I was a recording studio engineer. So I was a musician. I was in music technology. I was recording music. I was constantly listening to the sounds. I played drums. I studied drums for a few years. So I watched this video, and in terms of just the drumming rhythms and the drumming patterns that they're doing, it was super interesting to me. But then sonically, as a recording studio engineer, I'm like, oh my God, this sounds so good. It's like this really fat, heavy drum sound that they had through the cell phone, So it was the combination of those two things that just totally lit me up.
It was amazing. Do you dance also?
I do. I like, just dancing to music by myself. I've done some ecstatic dance. If you're familiar with that, it's good sometimes, but what I've been getting more and more into is partner dancing. So I am studying salsa and bachata dancing, and I also just recently, after being look into kizomba dancing, I just started getting into it actually over the past couple of weeks, and I'm super in love with it.
Isn't it really beautiful and sexy?
It is beautiful and sexy and subtle. It's like, it's what my body's been wanting.
Yeah, it's really amazing the connection that you get when you partner dance. How do you feel about that? What's gone on for you with that?
It fulfills a bunch of different needs for me. One is just, and maybe we can maybe it would make sense to get a little bit more into the context of me and my life, but I'll say briefly in the moment that one of the big things I've really suffered with a lot in my life has been loneliness. And I would imagine everybody to some extent can relate to the experience of being in a room full of people, but still feeling alone.
Yes.
And I've lived most of my life like that, which absolutely, I'm sure, informs the work that I'm doing, bringing men together, creating deeper intimacy, deeper connection, deeper community. So anyways, I get to go out and I get to just be with people. And also I get to be with people outside of the context of my normal personal development circles. I get to do like normal people things.
Just be free.
Yeah. Just like do normal people. Like I'm not talking about
all this stuff,
personal development stuff. So it's nice just to be, quote, normal person.
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
Yeah. I get physical touch needs met. I get to connect with people.
Yeah.
I get to practice embodied leadership. Like practicing leadership in an organization or, in a relationship is one thing, but get body to body with somebody and practice what it's like to be a totally trustworthy and safe space for them to follow and surrender as a lead. That's a whole other practice.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's sexy. I get to get really sensual and just bring like these qualities of sexual energy, even sometimes depending on the person I'm dancing with. and it just feels really good. It's really nourishing.
Yeah, I studied tango for the last 5 years. I mean, I've danced all my life, and tango just came to me like everything does when it's at the right time. And this was in the process of me going through a divorce, and it was really healing for me because I had not felt held and cared
Yeah.
for, by my partner for a long time. So it was really beautiful where I had to learn to, and I think this is what happens in partner dances. You have to learn to both stand on your own 2 feet, by yourself in your own power and strength, as well as surrender to your partner. And
Oh
that
yeah.
really takes a big leap of trust and faith. And you usually don't know your partners, or oftentimes don't even know your partners, but you have to come to this space where you're willing to give that up.
And at the same time, the moment you start dancing with them, you do know them. You can feel uh, how attuned of a lead the person you're with is. I can feel instantly how attuned of a follow and how trusting of a follow the woman that I'm with
Uh-huh.
is. And there's so much to extrapolate just from partner dancing in the context of relationship. What you're speaking to really gets right into the ideas of polarity that I'm super that I'm personally very fascinated by and really interested in, and that I think are really important for in kind of my worldview for everybody to have some awareness of, at least if we want to have successful relationships, whether they're romantic relationships or otherwise.
Right. It was interesting for me, because I've danced on my own a lot. I feel the music the way I feel the music, and I move the way I move. And so it was really challenging for me. A lot of times I would hear, my leaders say, I'm the leader, you're the follower. And I'd be like, ooh, sorry. So it's
Yeah.
this real sense of, oh, wow, I do have to surrender. Like, this is really hard for me to do.
Yeah. And I experience that with a lot of, like, there's women who are really good follows, and then there's women who are just kind of rigid. And the thing about this, and this totally applies to especially romantic relationship and any other kind of relationship too, is that in order for there to be a giver, there has to be a receiver. Like
Yeah.
a really painful experience for me as somebody who loves to love and who also loves to take the lead and to provide and to hold, uh, is that when I'm showing up wanting to give in those kinds of ways, but I'm not being received, there's nowhere for love to flow. There's no space for intimacy.
So how do you navigate that in your intimate relationships?
Um, well, just I mean, can you be a little more specific? Just like the deepening of intimacy, or like a moment where like I'm wanting to give and not feeling received, or
Yes, the moment that it happens to you, because this is the polarity of, sort of more masculine qualities and feminine qualities.
yeah,
And um and and i and i believe that we have both within us, and depending on the circumstance, we have to ebb and flow between the two.
yeah, yeah. And what I'll add is that for most people that I know, at least certainly for myself, is that we tend to orient ourselves in toward one side or the other. Like
Uh-huh.
the more and more that I know myself, the more I experience myself as a masculine being. I love to lead. I have such a deep desire to provide and hold. Um, and to have somebody surrender to me is like the best feeling in the world.
How do you know when someone surrenders to you? What does it look like?
I mean, there's all different contexts. It could be on the dance floor when somebody's really following my lead. It's like when I'm able to kind of move her body and move her hips in a certain way, and she's really following me. It's this amazing feeling. And then if she's stiff, I don't get that same feeling.
Right.
In a romantic relationship, it can be as simple as, there's a million examples I could give you, but it could be as simple as opening the door and um, for instance, the difference between There's one woman who I dated who I would open the door for, and she would say thank you, but there's kind of like a joking quality behind it, which is kind of her personality anyways,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to like a really heartfelt thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously not because she needs me to open the door for her, but because it feels she appreciates the service, the act
Right.
of
The
service.
sentiment. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like, there's a lot of, there's a lot of conflict within our society that, with sort of the rise of feminine, women wanting to assert their power and their strength and stuff. But at the same time, still be respected. And, like I want to be with someone who's a gentleman, who treats me like a lady.
Yeah.
And, and that shows that he cares for me by these little acts of service that he does for me. And they're not big, in individually, but in the context of the relationship, they add up to be huge.
Yeah. Well, and you talk about strength. The women that I do, go deep into intimacy with, and the woman that I want to be with is a woman who's strong enough to receive, who's strong enough in herself that she doesn't need to defend. She can actually be available to intimacy in that kind of a way.
Uh-huh.
So that kind of flips, the dominant paradigm of strength means that you can take the lead and you can handle things, but strength, and that's true, but strength can also mean that you trust yourself so much that you're able to trust another person and allow them to lead.
And so how do you learn to trust yourself so much?
There's I don't even know where to start with that.
It's a deep question. I mean, because, I know that you've gone through some experience in your life where you didn't really trust yourself.
Yeah, well, I would, on a very somatic level, and if somebody had asked me the question, "Do you trust yourself?" it wouldn't have been an obvious answer for me. No, I don't trust myself. Like that
Uh-huh.
wouldn't have been on my radar at the time.
Uh-huh.
But where I'm at in my own growth and healing journey, I can look back and say, yeah, I didn't trust myself. I learned on these really embodied levels that my expression was not okay, that it was not safe, that especially my grief and especially my anger, my expression of pain, like any place where I learned to just hide all of it and basically suppress my responses to the world. So I learned to turn off my expression in all these different kinds of ways because I didn't have enough of a sense of center or groundedness in myself to know that it would be okay that if I expressed something and lost connection with somebody, that I would still be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? It's kind of convoluted, but it's basically the idea that if I'm totally honest with how I feel, I'm going to lose love and connection from the people that I most want.
Why do you think that a lot of us feel that way?
Because it's biology. It's our evolution as mammals. One of our very fundamental core survival strategies as mammals is to stay in community.
Mm-hmm.
If we're literally, like, the idea on a subconscious level of losing connection with our communities means death, because that's how it has been for millions of years until this point in time where we can just go live and still go make money and live in a house, and we'll be physically okay even if we don't have community.
Well, and I also think the fight or flight thing comes into play a lot of times because we're not certain, we feel unsafe. And so that's generally your response. I'm either going to fight or I'm going to, run as fast as I can the other direction.
Or freeze, which is what
freeze, right?
I did, is going into a deep state of frozenness or helplessness, basically learned helplessness.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
And so how do you get yourself out?
Yeah, there's so many different pathways through the work that I do, the kinds of spaces that I create embody my my version of how do you get out of that, and our version of that, because I'm not doing it myself. And how do you get yourself out? I would say the simplest answer is kind of a bit of an abstracted answer. It's not very concrete, but how do you get yourself out is you put yourself in spaces with other people that feel safe to you.
And so do you think it starts with feeling safe with yourself?
There's that trope in the personal development world that you need to learn to love yourself first. I actually made a post on my Facebook about this just the other day.
Yeah, the chicken or the egg, I saw.
Yeah, totally. It's a chicken or egg question. The idea that you must learn to love yourself first is not true. The idea that learning to love yourself plays an integral role with learning to be loved by other people. Mm-hmm. Yes, true. And there's always, there's no single point of genesis for it, but absolutely there's got to be some like part in you that's got enough sense of self-love and self-belief to actually step into a space where you're going to be vulnerable with other people in a way that you haven't been before.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that vulnerability is a really challenging thing for men?
To generalize, yeah. I think that our culture doesn't, and actually I see it as an interplay between our biology and our culture. I don't think that, we can't separate socialization from biology. So I look at our culture and the way that it generally raises men and what it teaches men to do and what not to do. And I see that it has certain impacts on men, and they show up in the statistics too. Around homicide, around suicide, men are overwhelmingly in the majority in those places. People who are in prison. So these certain modes of socialization that men experience, they're not made up. They show up in numbers, mm-hmm. And facts. And my personal belief, my personal judgment is that the reason that things that like that's true, that those numbers are skewed in the ways that they are, is because there are biological distinctions between men and women, and our culture has just kind of amplified some of the male trauma, the elements of male trauma, and it kind of feeds it back to us in our culture. But they do have biological origins, in my judgment. For instance, just to give one little example, I do think that on a biological level, men are wired to be a little less in tune with their emotions and a little more oriented toward getting things done, like moving, right. Pushing through, right?
Right. Like the hunters and the gatherers versus the nurturing, women around the fire.
Totally. And I could imagine somebody hearing me say that and having a knee-jerk response to saying, no, but women can do that stuff too. And it's like, yes, I know that.
Right.
And again, I'm talking about, you look at the bell curve of things and how men are wired on average over, take a set of 1 million men and take a set of 1 million women and look at these certain characteristics, and you're going to find differences, and you're going to find the two groups are stronger or less strong in certain places, and that they complement each other in that regard.
Right.
Or they have the potential to complement each other in that regard if they're open to that kind of collaboration.
Right. Yeah. And I think that that's important, because I'm going to ask you about I've heard you talk about expressing your, being open and honest, expressing all of your emotions, even the messy ones, in an authentic and honest way. Because that you talk about closed and open-hearted anger, which I would like to hear more about, creating this sense of it's okay to share with you all of these messy sides of me, you know, but you have to come from creating a safe space enough for the recipient of those emotions. So can you sort of talk about your journey and your process of how you have come to think about all of this?
Yeah, and I'll qualify what you're saying a little bit. What I would never propose is that it is good and healthy to express everything all the time in every moment with everybody.
Right, right, yeah.
And having spaces where we can reclaim the full palette of our humanity is crucial to living happy, healed life, I believe, and to creating a more healed world. And what was the question again?
I'm asking about your experience with like closed-hearted versus open-hearted anger, expressing anger, and how you have come to overcome some challenges, because it sounds like you've had challenges in the past relating in those sorts of ways.
There's, you know, in unskilled ways, there's typically two things. There's really only two things that people can do with anger. One is to stuff it, and the other one is to
explode it.
Explode it. Barf it all over.
Right.
Or you at the driver in front of you, whatever it might be.
Right.
Either stuff it or explode it. And what I certainly experienced for myself and what I experienced with the men that I work with, and I work with a lot of women in my private practice as well, is that the origin of anger is a sense of a boundary being crossed. Like something happened and that kind of violates my own internal needs, and it hurts. Like pretty much always underneath of anger, there's some element of pain. There's often, and what I want to say about stuffing or exploding.
Can you repeat that again? I had a little wobble with my internet. I'm sorry.
Yeah. What did I even just say? I cannot remember what I just said. I'm so in the moment.
That's okay.
It'll be fine. I'll just keep going forward with it.
That's okay.
And the thing that I want to say about either stuffing or exploding your anger is that they're both dissociative mechanisms.
Yeah.
They both. Oh, yeah. So what I was saying is basically that underneath of anger, there's
pain,
oftentimes grief and pain, like pain or like a sense of pain / a sense of a boundary being crossed,
right?
Or a need not being attuned to. And so stuffing or exploding anger, they're both dissociative mechanisms that serve to pull us away from what we're actually feeling inside of our own hearts, which is, ow, that fucking hurt.
Yeah.
Or my God, usually it's, ow, that hurt in some form or another, right?
I was going to say, ow, that hurts, and that really pisses me off.
Yeah, totally. Yep. And so to the extent that some part of me is going, ow, that hurt, and that really pisses me off, and I'm going outside of myself and I'm being like, you motherfucker, like, I can't believe that you did that. Why would you do that?
Right.
That's me disconnecting from that's me using dumping my anger on somebody as a mechanism to avoid feeling my own pain.
Right.
And then if I'm stuffing the anger and I'm like, oh no, that didn't bother me, this is like, no, things are fine, that's also a mechanism that I can use to avoid actually experiencing my own pain. So when we're able to, usually because we feel safe enough, like there needs to be a sense of safety. When we feel safe enough to be able to come in contact with what's actually happening inside of our own bodies, and when we're actually able to make contact with that pain and with that anger and the grief and whatever, there may be a blend of things, and let it out, not in order to try to make the other person feel bad or to get them to take away my pain, but because like my body is expressing and I'm letting myself feel the pain that's inside of my heart right now. And the person or people that I'm with are not judging me. They're not taking it personally. They just get that I'm having an experience. Mm-hmm. Then that can be, that's an experience of open-hearted anger that can be really healing for both people and can actually very much be a gateway to deeper intimacy.
Yeah. I feel like when you're with people, they trigger aspects of yourself, you know, that are in pain, or, you know, there's a sense of pain or hurt or fear or judgment or guilt or whatever. And that when your partner is a safe enough space for you, that they are the healing balm to help you come to this place of loving and accepting whatever's going on inside of you.
Which might be exploding, but with a person who's a safe presence and who's not like, I had a moment with my mom a couple of years ago at 4th of July, and I was in a funky place for the trip. And we're toward the end of the trip, and there was a moment in the kitchen where she literally just exploded at me and started yelling at me. She threw the water in her glass. She didn't throw the glass, but she threw the water in it at me. I was just screaming at me, and I just dropped into presence.
Wow.
And I felt a little, you know, I could feel my knees shaking a little. There was a lot of energy in my body, but I wasn't taking it personally. I just listened to her. I reflected a few little things back, a few of her words back to her. And whenever there was kind of a pause, I said, what else? And she kept going. And then it shifted over to my sister, who was getting married, and she's afraid she's going to lose her daughter, and this and that. And I reflected a few things back to her, and I said, what else? And at some point, after not very long, after 10 or 15 minutes, she's probably like 5 or 10 minutes, she just broke into tears. You know?
Wow.
And obviously she wouldn't have done that if I told her that she's overreacting, or right, if I started arguing back, or if I froze up and said nothing or tried to walk away. You know, I felt grounded enough and solid enough in myself that I didn't need to take it personally. I can just recognize that here's a human being who's hurting and who just needs to express.
Wow. That's like a big thing, Robert, because I don't feel like very many people know how to do that at all.
I don't think very many people know how to do that at all.
I mean, what was it scary for you in a way? It wasn't scary. Like, like, holy shit, look at my mom, she's going crazy, you know?
No, there was energy. I could feel the adrenaline in my body, and I could feel there's a lot of energy in my body, but it was like, scary is not totally the wrong word, but I wasn't sitting there like,
I know, and I don't mean you were shaking, but just more of like surprise, like, holy, where is this coming from?
No, I was shaking. Like my knees were trembling. Because it was just a very intense moment. But I just wasn't making shit up about it. I wasn't making up any story. I wasn't feeling attacked. I wasn't making up any reason why she was feeling a certain way. I just heard her. Mm-hmm. And the only thing that has allowed me, you kind of asked this question earlier and we moved on from it, but you said, what has allowed me to get to something along the lines of what's allowed me to get to where I'm at? What allows me to create deeper intimacy with other people, something to that effect. Mm-hmm. The only thing that allowed me to create intimacy in that moment with my mom has been all the work that I've done around anger and fear and grief, and putting myself in spaces where I get to drop fully into the stored up emotions that are there, and I get to inhabit them, or let them inhabit me fully. And work through a lot of the backlog that was there, number one. And number two, like, and as I'm working through the backlog, it's like I come into myself in a way where I just, one of the words I use sometimes is unfuckwithable. It's like nothing can, there's a certain part of myself that nothing can impact, because I'm just
stable.
It's like, I'm just stable. Grounded. Not like I've integrated and released enough of the stored up emotions that they're not getting triggered by somebody else's anger or somebody else's grief or whatever. And I'm just like, this person's having an experience, and I can just be with them now because I've done the work of having the experience myself enough times that I'm not thrown off my center.
So can you talk about when you're the one exploding, like what's going on in your body? Because I'm I'm thinking about you talking about your somatic, therapy and your somatic experiences, and how do you learn to slow yourself down enough to really feel the 16 inches between your mind and your heart?
Yeah, well, I mean, you just answered the question right there. Is I put myself in situations where I can slow down enough to feel what's actually going on inside of my body.
How do you do that though?
You just start, I mean, all of us can feel when we're not doing that. All of us can feel when we're avoiding or skipping over some feeling. Like, we may not know that we know, but we all know. The signals are always there. We just may not have learned how to interpret them. I mean, for me, it came from suffering deeply around having stuffed all of these emotions for so long and being ready to kill myself because of it.
Wow.
Because it hurt so bad.
Wow.
And coming away from that, the bottom of that experience with, and still living with suicidal thoughts for years afterward, but at some point coming far enough away from it that I realized I can't turn off anymore. So for me, it really took hitting a place where I really was ready to end my life because it hurt so bad. And after I had moved away from that period, I was like, I'm not willing to go back there. It's just in my whole body, I have the experience of, I'm not willing to turn it off. I'm not willing to go back there. So that was the genesis of it for me. But then from there, it's just my willingness and or readiness to step into a space, we hold quarterly men's retreats for guys who are ready to do this kind of work. And there's other elements of the work as well, but we do deep work. And all it takes is a willingness and a readiness to say yes, to put down the money, put it under whatever the requirements may be, and to go do it.
What do you think gets somebody to the point where they're ready? Because there are plenty of people walking around just completely unconscious about all of the things that are going on internally.
I'm certainly, for a lot, I might even say most people, it takes hitting a point where life as they had known it is totally falling apart and breaking them probably, and breaking other people that they care about, very likely as well. And that's what we don't have a world that provides a lot of structures to help people wake up from that. And so a lot of times people need to go much more deeply into that, to be woken up from, the suffering of life as they have known it falling apart, for them to realize that they need to do it a different way. And some people never wake up. And I don't know what the difference is, but
I know that's my big question. How do some people go through their whole lives just it's like they have a veil in front of them, and they just can't see that. They can't see themselves clearly. They can't see the world around them clearly. It's like they're walking around in a fog.
Yeah. And I don't think we'll ever have an answer for why this person and not the other person, but, and I don't totally get it either, but I know what it was like to be there at the same time. I was walking around in a fog for most of my life. And I feel blessed that I was able to wake up from it.
Yeah.
But not everybody does.
So how do you help these men wake up when they come to you?
We just bring them really deep into their humanity, really, which means the full palette, the full range of our aliveness. There are so many facets of being a human being that, and most of us are taught that only a small range of those things is acceptable. From our play and our creativity and our imagination, most of us learn to turn a lot of that stuff off as we grow up. Our grief and our pain, a lot of us learn to turn that stuff off as we grow older. Our rage and our anger, in all kinds of different circumstances, in personal situations, but also at what's happening around us in the world. Our passion is very related to anger. in my experience. And we learn to turn a lot of the stuff off play. So we bring guys into a space where we just take them deep around all of it. We play really hard. We bring them really deep into processes that allow them to make contact with their anger and with their grief, with their, and ultimately kind of shedding a lot of the layers that they've been walking around with, and oftentimes we have a lot of self-aware dudes come through our workshops, but they're still making contact with parts they didn't know they were holding on to. And shedding these layers and coming into contact with a deeper, truer version of themselves, and being able to create a vision for their life and the kind of world that they want to see from that place. And that's why we call it the leadership intensive. It's about helping men come into contact with the truth of who they want to be and what they want to create in the world, and so they can begin to lead more fully in that way.
I think a lot of times, as you grow up, you have these messages that wherever you are, play wise, emotional wise, imagination wise, creativity wise, that's not right. Something's wrong with what you're doing. And so you get all these messages like, oh, I have to shut that down. I have to shut that down. Oh, I can't really reveal that. Oh, I'm not safe to express this. And so I feel like, as you're growing up, you get all these messages to say who you are and what you want to express isn't right.
Yeah. And what I want to add is that a lot of times those messages are verbal and they are explicit, and a lot of times they're not. Like for me, my journey was so confusing because I was never told you can't or don't or stop. But it came in many more subtle ways, just where my parents were holding on to trauma and they weren't as kind of responsive to me as emotionally as I may have needed or wanted them to be at the time. But there was nothing ever overt or explicit message wise. There were there's some saying, I forget exactly how it goes, but it says something like 80% of communication is nonverbal. And this absolutely holds true in this realm as well.
Do you feel like men in general have a more like sort of box that they put themselves in? Like, as a man, I have to show up XYZ.
More than women?
Or just in different ways?
Off the cuff, I wouldn't judge that either does more so than the other group on average. There's a lot of boxes that women get put into too, for sure.
So this is about breaking out of the box.
Yeah, I do think that there tends to be a little less acceptance or compassion for the boxes that men get put into. That's just coming through my filter from where I stand, and I'm willing to be wrong about that. But I think there's a little bit of that going on, especially in the post-feminism era and the era of Me Too, and where women, kind of reclaiming their voices and speaking up and reclaiming their sovereignty. And the shadow of that is that the suffering that men are experiencing in the boxes that they've been put into aren't being acknowledged, and they need to be acknowledged. All of our boxes need to be acknowledged for us to come back together into a more whole and healed world.
Right. Because I feel like it really is, for me, that all of us have some love, understanding, compassion, acceptance of whoever you are, however you show up. And it also goes to, responsibility. I mean, I love what you were saying about, when you work with these men, like, what kind of man do you want to become? Who do you want to be in this world? And so how do you work on yourself to show up, to work through the stuff that you need to work through, to show up in the way that you want to show up? Yeah.
And there are guys who are already on the track and already aware that they are already asking themselves that question, or aware that they want to start asking themselves that question. And then there are guys who are just their paradigm is falling apart and they have no idea what's next, but they're just terrified by what's happening right now. Mm-hmm. They're not even able to get to the step of what kind of man do I want to be? They're like, my marriage is falling apart.
Oh shit. Oh shit. Yeah. Now what?
I'm hitting rock bottom with addiction,
So you work with men in all, at all different places.
Yeah. The guys we work with tend to be a little bit farther. We don't tend to work so much with the rock bottom guys necessarily. In the same way as, like a 12-step program might, we do tend to work with guys who are a little bit farther along on the journey.
Uh-huh.
And there's a huge variety of experiences and different stages of life. For some guys, it's their first men's retreat and it totally blows their mind. And for other guys, they've been doing this work for 20 years or whatever, and it's still a powerful experience. Whole range of different experiences that guys are showing up with.
I feel like it's basically like you are giving men permission to just be.
Yeah.
And so how can we do that for ourselves? And how can we do that for each other?
Yeah. And there's no single answer to that, but that's what you're doing these interviews for,
Yeah. Yeah.
Creating a space and showing, not just talking about, but showing presenting an actual vision for a different way of doing it, for a different way of being that's going to spark some ideas for the person listening, or some spark a new sense of direction, or reignite an already existing sense of direction that's going to motivate them to do something a little bit different than they would have otherwise.
Right. I do feel like it's this huge paradigm shift. You and your partners, and you can talk about that, coming together to create this new way of being a man in the world.
Yeah. And it's funny because it's, a new way of being a man in the world, but it's how we all start out. None of us starts out
right,
closed off and shut down and
right,
in addiction, or with a broken down marriage, or crushed with shame. None of us start out that way.
Right. I know we start off innocent, pure, playing freely, using our imagination, expressing verbally like no, or
totally
having a temper tantrum, or running through the streets, jumping and playing, and with no abandonment, all that kind of stuff. It's just like, I just am who I am, and I don't really care what you think.
And so we're creating a space for guys to come back to that part of themselves, and to be able to do it with the perspective and the self-awareness that adults have.
Uh-huh.
You get to integrate those two elements, the freedom of expression along with the discernment and the judgment. And yeah.
And so how have your relationships changed as a result of you doing this work?
It's hard to even know where to start. My life is immeasurably better for it. One of the first things that comes to mind is with my family and with my parents, in a family culture where talking about feelings and talking about what's actually in the space was never something that we did.
Uh-huh.
And I paid the price, as I've spoken to a little bit about that. And I'm just bringing these really real, vulnerable, raw conversations to my parents that on some level I learned, the message that I got was that if I bring these parts of myself, I'm going to lose love from my parents. But I'm bringing these pieces, the grief, this anger, this hurt, this all these different facets of me that I've stuffed down, and they're still with me. And I'm blessed about that. A lot of people don't have parents who are willing to go through that kind of a process. And I get that. But the level of healing and openness and conversation and honesty that I'm bringing to my family is just, it was not anywhere on the paradigm at all. And I know that I'm making a massive difference in my family culture.
Wow.
my romantic relationships they're just off the charts sexy in a way that they never could be. They're super fucking hot. They're really rich sexually, really deep and powerful sexually. They're really powerful in terms of emotional intimacy in a way that they never were before. They're really powerful in terms of clarity and being upfront about stuff and creating a relationship that's based on honesty and truth rather than hiding and obscuring.
Yeah.
My friendships are amazing. I'm doing work that I'm on this earth to do and that I love doing and that I wouldn't give up for anything. I feel super on purpose. I'm more and more alive and excited and passionate in all areas of my life. And this is coming from somebody who's ready to kill himself.
I know. I was
20 years ago,
going to say, you don't even probably recognize yourself, that person that you were 20 years ago.
Yeah, very different.
Wow. It's because somebody asked me the other day, like, self-love is such a big thing, but why should you love yourself?
Yeah, only because of all of that stuff.
Only because of all of that.
And the stuff that our guys get, they make more income, that they go home and they send me a text and he's like, I just had the best sex of my life. And I'm like, yeah, you did.
Woohoo!
Their relationships with their daughters and sons get better, with their partners it's just like, and this is one of the big things for me about my work is communicating to guys in a compelling enough way that they can get over the hump of resistance to being like, oh yeah, I want that.
Yeah.
Because
do you want more money? Do you want more sex? Do you want to feel more connected?
Yeah, exactly. Like,
who would honestly, say no to those things?
And a lot of people do. They're not ready. It requires a willingness to let your world come apart how you have known it, and that's terrifying.
Yes, it is.
It requires courage, and a lot of people just aren't there yet.
Well, and my definition of courage is being scared as shit and doing it anyways.
Yeah, totally. And some people are ready and some people aren't. So we take the ones who are.
Wow. So do you want to talk a little bit about you and Joshua and Peter?
I mean, I feel like I've interspersed it throughout this conversation fairly well. I'll just say that I have a business partner, Joshua Hathaway. Our company is the Brotherhood Community. You've heard about the kind of work that we do with men. We run quarterly weekend intensives. They're called the Men's Leadership Intensive. We do them typically on the West Coast. We have on a virtual training for men. It's an 11-week live virtual training called Authentic Dating Secrets. And this is for guys who want to learn how to basically be better with women and do it without being a creepy douchebag. Show up in ownership of their desire and their attraction and express it in a way that actually creates connection and creates intimacy and helps everybody get more of what they want, which is connection, better sex, whatever it might be. For each particular guy.
So to find you, where do they look?
Brotherhoodcommunity.com.
Brotherhoodcommunity.com. Okay. So the last question that I usually ask my guests is, what is your definition of real love?
My mind went to was that a 90s song? Real love. I'm searching for a real love. Gotta make my heart sing real love. Do you know that song? Who did that one? Do you remember?
I don't know.
Okay. It's like a 90s R&B.
Yeah.
What is real love? I don't know how to answer that. Do I?
Everybody has a different answer. It's fascinating.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm gonna have to give me a moment to tune into my answer for that.
Not your mind. Those 16 inches. Back to your heart.
I would probably give you a different answer if I sat with it more and let it percolate. But in this moment, what the answer that I'll give you is that real love happens when a person is just an open channel for the full range of their emotional expression. To happen, just like I've talked about this, my mom blows up at me and starts yelling at me, and 15 minutes later she's in my arms sobbing. That's intimacy. That it's when we're able to be clean, open channels for our expression. We're available for intimacy. We're available for connection. We're available for passion, for joy, for just to really experience the full range of life, and to do that with other people. And that's an incredibly loving place to oneself, and it allows us to be incredibly loving with other people as well, and non-people as well.
Yeah, it's really like just creating a safe space for yourself so that you create that safe space for others to just be. It's a beautiful thing. And look how I would
say collaborating with other people, because in doing that for myself, it happens, there's no single point of genesis again.
Right.
If I'm doing it with somebody else, we're both getting it. So there's like a collaborative element to safety. Which
I've been thinking about lately, like, we're meant to be connected, like you started off saying, from the umbilical cord. We have always been connected. And when we come out, it's like, figuring out how to maintain and nurture and nourish all of those connections so that we do feel a part of both ourselves and with each other, and a part of this big universe. And it's a really beautiful thing. I mean, you've had an amazing journey. I just am so in awe of the inner work that you have done, and how you're working to shift the paradigm. You have a big mission and a big purpose, and you are showing up fully. And I really, really appreciate that, Robert.
Yeah. Thank you, Dawn.
Yeah. So thank you so much for being here with me. It's been an honor and a privilege, and you are welcome back anytime.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Okay. So if you like what you heard today, please subscribe and share with your friends. If you would like support in finding more connection, expansion, freedom, authenticity in your relationships, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at The Awakening with Dawn. Feel free to send me a message, and I'd be happy to help you find and create more real love in your life. And remember, the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one you have with yourself, so that you can be the kind of partner that you want to have. So thank you again, Robert. I really appreciate you being here. Thanks for listening, everybody. I'll see you next time. Take care.